So we're going to start moving on to actually some of the specific interventions done in organizational development. And I think the first thing I really want to open up with as we start to talk about process intervention skills is that there's a broad concept throughout organizational development, and that is communication and structure. So as we talk about the various types of interventions that we use in organizational development and ways that we can actually improve organizations, you're going to start to see some broad themes that generally, if I could just kind of summarize the life cycle of an organizational development intervention, it's usually about data gathering, finding out and observing and gathering data about what is the current situation in the organization. So what is the current process? What is the current structures, reportings, norms? It's really trying to get a good picture of the organization. And then it's communicating that information back to the people doing it. So in other words, a lot of times we actually lose track, if you will, of what are the specifics of our organization. What is the reporting structure? What is the norms of behavior? Who are the people that are taking on various roles in our organization? And are those official roles, or are those kind of, again, roles that have been created through just interactions and norms? So the communication of the gathering of that data is often an important process, an important part of organizational development, because it's allowing us to actually be a window, if you will, to allow people to see the organization from the outside. And a lot of times that's helpful in itself. Now, then we move on to active interactions in changing how people communicate, how people report to each other, and how communication is handled through an organization. And often what we find is whenever an organization has any problems, 8 times out of 10, some of the problem at least is communication. And communication being blocked, communication being hoarded, the right communication not occurring, the way communication is being occurred. I know this happens in all organizations. I recently got a very impersonal memo that the message, once I boiled it down from my superior, was a very simple one and an easy to understand one, and honestly something that I could easily correct and take care of. However, the way the memo was written, the terminology and language within that memo, and the fact that a memo was the choice of communication, I probably would have responded much more positively if that had been a short in-person communication that was focused on the main point of it. So again, we can start looking at how is communication occurring. And finally, we're often looking at, as a part of that, the structure of an organization. And that's, again, how people work together, how people are assigned to teams and groups, how the departments are structured, what's the reporting structure, how many subordinates or direct reports does each supervisor have, and can those changes be happening? So again, we're looking at first, an analysis of the organization, providing information communicated back to the organization of here's how you're doing things now. And then interventions usually focused on either the structure or the communication or both within an organization. Now there's going to be exceptions, but that's a broad kind of big picture look. So we're going to talk about process intervention skills, which in many ways is kind of combining that concept in our first intervention that we're going to walk through. So just kind of a background within the paradigms of organizations. Changes are occurring in leadership styles. So we are seeing a shift across organizations. You may have heard the terms transformational versus transactional leadership. Transactional leadership, in the very shortest of forms, basically means a manager who rewards and punishes. So they direct behavior and they direct efforts in their team by the use of reward power and punishment power. So it's transactional. You do your job, you get this reward. You excel at your job, you get this reward. You fail at your job, you get this punishment. Now, that's kind of an old style way of looking at organizations, but it's not necessarily a wrong way. Some people actually respond better to transformational leadership. And I think that's one of the things to keep in mind is that though we're going to talk about assumptive interventions that are assuming that these will work in most situations, but we're kind of ignoring the person environment fit. There are some people that respond better to rewards. I know my wife, for example, is very money motivated. So generally any attempt to kind of engage her enthusiasm is going to be less effective than if you just say, get this new project done and do it well and you'll get X amount of money. That's how she responds. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to know that about the people you're trying to lead. Now, transformational leadership is more about a style that fits very much within the philosophy of organizational development. Again, the philosophy is we're wanting to make organizations more successful, but we're wanting to do them in a very open and communicative way. We're wanting to increase lines of communication. We want to get people focused on not just the tasks, but also making sure the people doing the tasks are enjoying it and are engaged in the organization. And that's a very transformational style. It's the idea of actually inspiring people to do well. So, generally speaking, as we see leadership styles change, we also need to ask about the structure of those leadership styles. So, in a very hierarchical organization with very tight lines of report, think of kind of a military structure. Transactional style is actually going to probably be more effective in that situation because there's not a lot of room for a transformational leader. Because a transformational leader has to put a lot of trust in their direct reports. They have to be willing to inspire, but then also let the people get the job done. So transformational style tends to work better in kind of group settings and team settings where the actual people that are doing the job have more control over the job. So organizations are relying more on this team approach. We're seeing more and more organizations move to some form of team leadership and team function. So managers are needing new skills as they're having to learn how to lead and manage these teams. So understanding group and team behavior is somewhat needed, and that's kind of the idea of process intervention. Process intervention is about looking at groups and teams and the communication within them. So process intervention is an OD practitioner skill/intervention used for helping work groups become more effective. So it's really kind of a diagnostic process where you're looking at pre-existing teams. So we're not coming in and creating teams. We're coming into an organization that has teams already in function. And then we're really going to want to start to kind of focus on how those teams conduct their processes, how they actually get things done, and what they're actually getting done. So it helps work groups understand the way it operates. So again, it provides that data, that outside view, communicated back to the group of this is how you're functioning, this is kind of the roles people are taking, these are the norms that exist. So the manager then can use this information to help team learns to diagnose and solve their own problems. So again, teams work best when they're empowered to do their own work. So this also allows teams to become more independent because it's also putting the tools back in the team's hand. Here's the information about how you're functioning. How do you want to handle fixing the situation or improving how you function? So when we look at group process interventions concentrate on how groups and individuals within a group behave. The process is how of the group, so how it functions, how communication occurs, what roles there are, what norms are occurring. Are there any particular members that are hoarding information that is vital to keeping the group functioning well? Are there various people that are vital to making sure the tasks are getting done on time? Are there certain people that are vital in kind of keeping the morale of the group up? How is the function? And also, how does the group actually work? How does it assign tasks? How are those tasks completed? The content is the what of the group, the work that it actually does. So that's kind of the outcome, if you will. What's actually being produced by the group and what is the metric that its success is being measured by? So there's 5 areas critical to effective organizational performance, and this is true across all organizations, but it's really a part of process intervention as well, looking at groups and group process. So when we talk about process intervention, a lot of these kind of models and skills we're going to talk about could be used very easily in other settings, but the term process intervention usually refers specifically to group process. So when we're examining a group's process, we're looking for communication. So how is information shared? How do people communicate? What is the nature of that communication? Is it incredibly task only focused? Is it task and social focused? And by social, again, it's basically just acknowledging people are people and focusing. So I mentioned a memo earlier that was very directive, even though the message itself was fairly simple and attainable. So that was an example of a very task-focused memo. There was very little in there about praising what I've done in the past or what's actually going on within my work group. It was simply, this needs to get done now. That's a very task-focused. Now, that is all the information that needed to be given. However, if that same message had also included recognition of the work that's been done before, a hope that this change is actually going to result in even bigger and better things for the work group, that information is that social aspect. That's actually making sure not only is the message being heard, it's being heard in a way that empowers the person and wants them, motivates them. We're going to that idea of transformational leadership again, to actually get involved in making the problem go away. We also look at member roles and the functions in the group. So what are the actual roles that people have within a group? And each group tends to have a delineation of various roles. You can think back on any group that you've been involved in. You can definitely find, think of the person that kind of faded to the background and just did the bare minimum. You can think about the person that kind of dominated the group with their ideas. You can probably think of someone that actually really didn't do much in the group as far as getting the actual task done, but was instrumental in kind of keeping the group quote unquote fun and engaged. You can think of the person that seemed to, mainly just want to get the job done, focus on the task. Those are all different roles. So taking a look to see what those roles are and how they function in a group is important as well. Group solving and decision making, so how a group actually handles a crisis, handles a problem, and how decision making is being handled. And there's different ways that a group can do this, but again, it's good to get it on paper to look at how is it actually being occurring. Because again, a lot of times groups haven't even really thought about the process they go through. And having that put in front of them kind of serves as a really good diagnostic tool. The group norms and growth. So how is the group currently grown? Is the group still in the process of changing? Is it a fairly stable group? And what are the norms of behavior? And again, a lot of times norms are never written down. They just form over time through interactions. And again, having an outside source provide a diagnostic on what the norms seem to be can also provide an insight into how do we make this group function better. And finally, how is leadership and authority being handled within that group? So not only within the decision making within the group, but how does the actual group itself interact with its supervisor or supervisors? So communication, analyzing communication process within the group, we're basically observing the length of time members talk, who they talk to, who interrupts whom. We're taking detailed notes. We're basically trying to create a profile, if you will, of the personality of the communication within a group. And this will often involve actually sitting in on the group. Now, process intervention can be done by a group on itself. So you could actually have a group that basically is asked, I want you guys to all go through this process the next time you have a meeting and take notes about how much time each person's talking, who they're talking to, who interrupts. It could also be done by outside intervention. In other words, a OD specialist coming in and observing the group. I've sometimes done this. There's been a few times where I've been working in an organization that actually records their group meetings, and that can be a great way of getting that information as well if the group's already doing that. I would kind of caution against adding video or audio recording to a group if they're not normally doing that. We want to look at that member roles and functions, so observing roles and the functions of members. And generally roles are divided into three categories: group task function, group building and maintenance function, and individual function. Another way to think of this is group task function is getting the job done. That's actually any roles that are involved or any people that are mainly focused on just we want to get the task done. We want to get that observable objective that our performance is being measured on done and done in a good way. Group building and maintenance functions is that social aspect. It's basically the people that are trying to make the group more engaged, more open, more enjoyable. And individual function can often sometimes also be referred to as gaming or political. It basically means that it's the person that's doing individual functions within a group is mainly focused on their own interests, not the group's. Now, you're going to find that some people, all of their behaviors, notice that the roles are divided into three categories, but the categories themselves are listed by behaviors. You can have someone that's 30% task function, 40% group building maintenance, and 30% individual function. So it's not necessarily someone's going to completely fall into one of these groups, but we generally find that if you're in one of these categories, it's usually the majority. So there's going to be people who are mainly group task focused, mainly focused on group building, and mainly focused on individual function. So group task function, initiating and suggesting, seeking opinions, asking questions, elaborating, summarizing, testing for consensus. Notice that those are all fairly positive. So let's flip right over the group building and look at individual functions. Dominating, acting out, blocking, seeking recognition, pleading for special interests. Those are all individual functions. Those are people that are focused not on the group's goals or not even necessarily the organization's goals, but they're interested in their own political goal. So there's a little bit of overlap though, because what we're really wanting to initiate in a group is a collaborative environment. It's one of the main advantages of having group behavior. You're getting to actually get the opinions of multiple people on problems. You're getting to have group decision making, and you're also getting people to be more invested in their work because they're invested in the decision making. Those are advantages of groups. And in order to have that, the task functions do need to be focused on more positive. So seeking opinions, asking questions, elaborating, not necessarily dominating and directing. And so again, we kind of have to think about those in those terms. And finally, we have the role task of helping the group grow and improve. So harmonizing, compromising, encouraging. Now, there can also be a little bit of negativity in there. Gatekeeping actually is someone that is involved in a social role, but what they're mainly doing is they're actually trying to be in between the leadership of the group and the rest of the group. They're trying to become a gatekeeper and also just following along. So again, these are not hard, fast groups or norms and what I mean or roles, but what I mean by that not being hard and fast is there's going to be some overlap. We're really wanting to look at, though, when we're doing a role analysis of a group, is where does each person fall as far as the majority of their behaviors, and are any of those behaviors hampering the advantages of a group? Group making, group problem solving and decision making, so helping the group understand how it makes decisions. And again, this is providing that diagnostic look again. And group consensus is once all members share in making and will support. So we're not necessarily looking for a complete agreement in a group at all times. It's going to be hard to get everyone to 100% agree on an idea. The idea, though, in group consensus is that all members have had a chance to be heard, all members have shared their opinion, and the decision that's made is one that the group will support, not necessarily 100% agree with, but at least will support. And that's usually the goal. And making groups realize that this is the way that they should be making decision making within the group. Group norms and growth. So assisting group in understanding how its norms have formed, what they actually are, and how those norms affect decision making. And a lot of times what we find is that the group norms that we're most interested in is what is the norms for decision making? In other words, have certain people learned just not to even involve themselves in the decision making anymore because they felt like they've been shot down in the past, or that only certain people's opinions are valued? If that's happening and that norm exists, that's not just a norm that we need to identify, that's a norm that's also affecting group decision making and group problem solving. So we're really wanting to look at how these norms have formed and how they're affecting decision making. Groups will improve decision making as members grow and as members learn more about the organization. And by growth, I'm talking about actually engagement and feeling like they're being heard and feeling that they're a part of the decision-making process. So as people feel that, as the norms move towards that, you'll also find improved decision-making within that group. Because again, one of the main advantages of groups and teams is multiple viewpoints are being accessed to make decisions and to solve problems. And finally, leadership and authority. So groups need to understand the impact of leadership and authority. So is there someone within the group that organizationally has the position of leadership? Who is it in the group that actually reports outside of the group, interacts with other people that aren't necessarily in this group or team? Who is the direct supervisor of the group that the group is reporting to that's actually basically paying attention to the group's outcomes? And what are the roles of formal and informal leaders within the organization? And again, a lot of times we'll find that when we do these kinds of analysis, there may be a formal leader, but there may also be an informal leader that has as much, if not more, influence on the group. And again, making the group aware this is the dynamic can help it actually help itself to make better decisions. Generally speaking, again, from a process intervention, we're usually wanting to move a group more towards a leadership function being shared among group members, that we have a transformational leadership if there is a leader within the group, and that leader is mainly focused on trying to build that kind of collaboration, that group consensus we talked about.